I will kick over to my page, over to the pages here.
I think we need to add juvenile content to that disclaimer too, right?
No.
Well, so I have it. It's preset on our YouTube channel. For that too, so. All right, here we go. Intro.
Jaws live, baby. You're gonna need a bigger boat.
All right, there we go. Nice little intro from Matt. Hello, and happy Thursday. How are we doing tonight, guys?
Good, thank you.
All good.
I'm ready for the weekend.
I was gonna say Thursday night. Everybody ready for the weekend? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I want to thank everyone for jumping on here and joining us. I'm sure we're going to have some people chiming in here shortly. We've got a great special guest this week. We have Chris Shaw Myers joining us tonight. So nice round of applause for Chris. I want to thank you for coming on tonight, buddy. He's come on and
thank you for having me
for about an hour, and we are incredibly excited by that. So yeah, absolutely. And really, really intrigued by what I see. And I have to say, first off and foremost, Chris, you are one of a couple recent, like newer items that are up and coming and have come out. And it's such a breath of fresh air at times. Not that I get bored with the world of Jaws, but it's things like your book that come out that kind of keep that heartbeat going. You know, here we are 50 years later. We've got new information. We've got some new material out there. And so it's been great. It really has. So I want to thank you very much for your contributions.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Jaws is the kind of movie that's going to create stuff like this. So happy to be part of it.
Awesome. So how about a little bit, Chris, of a background on you, a little bit of your upbringing, your childhood, into the Shaw, and along with the Shaw family. Can you give us a little bit of background on yourself?
Yeah, sure. And speaking of background, I've got my office behind me. You guys all have cool Jaws stuff behind you, so I'm feeling a little bit inadequate here right now. But
well, Chris, it's a $26 Amazon poster on my wall in my den, so it's really not that extravagant.
It's just a fireplace decorated for the fall. So
These are beach towels.
Put on my cap.
there you go.
There you go. You got it. That's right.
I usually have something up, but my wife works from home on Thursday, so that's her setup. So.
Well, Michael, even you've got the technical equipment behind you. You look like you're part of the podcast world.
I got the important part tonight.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Anyway, great to be here, and thank you for having me. So to answer your question, what's my background, Nate? My background is nothing special. It's not, nothing glamorous. I'm not an actor. I'm not even really a writer. I mean, I've written this, this one book, and I've become a writer, and I've got more, in the works now. But, but my life was just completely different from, Robert Shaw's, as an example. I went to college. I went to graduate school. I spent a career working in international business. I raised 2 kids, and I'm about to become a grandfather for the first time in a couple of months. So,
hey, really?
It's like the Chinese saying, the Chinese curse, may your life be interesting. So I wasn't cursed, with all the drama that comes with some lives. Just had a lot of fun, and family is everything. And I'll tell you what, growing up as part of the greater Shaw family, right? My mother, Joanna Shaw, was Robert's younger sister. I never thought too much about Robert. He was just my uncle, right? Just another member of the family. He was larger than life. He was a great storyteller, but all of the people in that family were great storytellers. I could, sit and listen and laugh, out loud at some of the things that he would tell us. But that same was true of my Uncle Sandy and my mom and others in that, and especially my grandmother. I call her Mrs. Shaw in the book. And the joke, by the way, or not joke, the hidden sort of truth. It's if you were to ask somebody outside of the family who had the biggest personality of all of the Shaws, everybody would say Robert Shaw, because he had an enormous personality. He would take over a room as soon as he entered it. But the sort of the inside, knowledge is that the biggest personality in that family was his mother, Doreen Avery Shaw, Mrs. Shaw. She was just a larger than life figure, like her children and like Robert. And as a young boy, she absolutely terrified me because she could be so critical constantly of everything. You'd be playing solitaire and she would walk by and say, "You'd probably cheat if someone wasn't watching, right?" And, little jabs. And then, a minute later, she'd have you laughing out loud. So she was, she was a scary person when I was young. And then when I got older and I spent a lot of time with her, with my grandmother, because we went on multiple vacations together and I had her in my car for multiple weeks, driving tours of England and Cornwall and various places. Got to know her really well. And just appreciated that it was all kind of tongue in cheek, and nothing too serious. Just a big personality. I tell you about. So we had the Jaws 50th anniversary on Martha's Vineyard this past summer. I know you guys were there. We were just talking about it. But in 2012, long before I started writing this book, I went to the Jaws Fest, right? There was a Jaws Fest in 2012 on Martha's Vineyard. Were you guys there by any chance?
I was. Michael and I were.
I was not. These two were. Yeah, I was not.
Yeah. So, and it was similar to the Jaws 50th. But so my mother, right, was invited to speak on a panel and to do some other things during that, little festival. And I was there with a couple of my sisters, and we watched people come up to her, knowing that she was Robert Shaw's sister and asking her for her autograph. Were you one of them? You were one of them.
I have your mother's autograph. Yes.
Oh, that's great. Oh my God.
We actually have a picture of her from 2012 standing with Mike.
There you are, Michael.
Yep.
Okay. Wow. Hey, that's a keeper. I don't have that one.
Trying to see if I can send the one that I had.
We found it I'm sorry. What's that, Janie?
I said I'm going to see if I can find the one that I have of her.
Yeah. We found it.
I'd be happy to make a copy and send it to you. Members of Robert's family would be, sought after, and it just it was a bit of a lark for us, but we had a lot of fun with it. And then I ended up writing this book, and again, as we were discussing earlier, it's not your typical biography. It's not I was talking to another biographer, a real biographer. I say real, right? A biographer who writes, multiple biographies. And he said to me, Chris, I'm just a reporter, right? My biographies are, listing the facts and the successes and this and that, but you're different. You brought these characters to life. So it's been a lot of fun having put the book out and having written it in maybe a different style from what a lot of people were expecting. It's not the be all and end all of Robert Shaw's life. And some huge, big Jaws fans, big Robert Shaw fans might be disappointed that much of the book is devoted to other members of his family, like his father and mother and his sister, my mother. And that's sort of the bad news. The good news is that for people interested, that was a really interesting family, the Shaws. And, they all had very interesting lives. So there's other, things of interest to read. But the other good news is, I think, that rather than just get his accomplishments and what Robert did with his life, you're going to get to know him as if he was an old friend. And, that was why I wrote it like that. And we'll see where it goes.
And I want to apologize for my rudeness or forgetfulness, but we are talking about Chris Meyer's book, Robert Shaw. So honestly, a lot of people here are probably familiar with that, but if you're not, this is a book that he created and we're talking about now. And I'm I want to say, I don't know if I'm in the middle of it, maybe a little bit more closer to the end of the book, but what you're saying, Chris, is exactly true. It is not I don't want to say a droning biography, but it is not just a published biography of like the events of his life. I want to say it's the family dynamic as a whole is what I'm gathering from it. So you get all of those parts. You get a bit of, your mother and Robert and siblings growing up being very young, like, say like World War II era.
Yeah.
You get, a bit of the grandfather and his story. And you get, you talked about the grandmother having such a strong personality. I mean, my gathering from what I see is she kind of had to. I mean, she's the one that had to keep everything together. And so she had to be tough as nails because there was no option B. And then, the rounding of the siblings, of all your aunts and uncles and your mother, and really the dynamics of them as a whole and how that all kind of congeals or all kind of comes together. It all stems from that nucleus. And so it was really interesting how you go into that family dynamic and you kind of weave in and out. You start off talking about early childhood and then it kind of jumps forward a little bit, maybe with like your mother's life and her moving, say, from the UK over to the States, jumps into what Robert was doing. And then it kind of weaves its way back in. And so it really, you kind of intertwine and you see those relationships. They tend to be resounding, even though at times when the family was apart, they always seem to reconvene and that family unit kind of comes back together. So really very, very interesting, very well written. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Their lives unfolded across, different parts of the world. But, I like to say that this is the story of Robert Shaw, but it's the story of some other hidden figures in his life. And I mentioned some of them already, right? His parents and his sister. But the story takes place starting in the Orkney Islands, right? Those very remote islands off the northern coast of Scotland. And and that's where they spent the first 6-8 years of their lives as young children. This is prior to World War II. And the Orkney Islands, the people from the Orkney Islands, not only do they not consider themselves British, they don't consider themselves Scottish, right? They're Orcadians. And, they have no allegiance to, to any country other than, themselves. And it's they're a little bit like the beginning of Jaws, right? Where if you haven't been on the island for 3 generations, you're a foreigner, right?
Not an islander. That's right.
You're not an islander.
You weren't born here. You're not an islander. Sure.
Exactly. And that's what the Orkney Islands were like. And the Shaws were new to them, right? They weren't even first generation. They were people coming in. The Orkney Islands and then Cornwall and South Africa. And of course, once Robert's career took off, the story moves into the, West End of London and backstage of Broadway. And, it's a funny thing about Broadway, by the way. And these stories are all stories that I heard. But then a few years ago, I sat down with my mother and I said, look, I think this would be an interesting book, but refresh my memory and tell me more about this and this and this. And so I must have spent 100 hours talking to her about, all the things that are in the book. And one of the things she said was that as much as film seems more glamorous than stage, every actor that she's ever known, Robert included, preferred being on stage to being in a
Correct.
movie. And when you go backstage, it's a little hard to understand because it's very cramped little dirty, dirty corridors and cramped little rooms, and it's so unglamorous. And yet they all preferred it. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the Shaws and about acting, and just from listening to my mother sort of retell these stories that I'd heard.
Sure. I just want to chime in. I got a couple people that are kicking in some comments. Robert is joining us from Scotland. He's saying hello.
Wow.
Hello, Chris. And over on the Facebook pages, we've got Nick Hathaway who lives in the Vineyard. He's joining us tonight. He's saying hello. I was definitely there in 2012 as well. Awesome time. Hope you're doing well. And so one or two other people there hopping on. Kelly's on joining us as well. So yeah. So a bunch of people hopping on there and hanging out with us. We got Claudia joining us as well. So yeah, very cool. And I'm sorry, guys. Please jump in. I came across certain things that really stood out in my mind. And some of it were some of the linears of the diversity and the exposure, say between your mother and your uncle. It's almost like they went in completely different paths, but yet there were some parallels there. Your mom was very well traveled, it seems.
Yeah.
She ended up, she was in London. She was, I believe, was Africa for a while.
Yeah.
Was very impressed and, met Nelson Mandela, was very big on rights.
Yep.
She was an educator. She ended up spending quite a bit of time over here in my part of the world, in Pennsylvania, and back and forth and where Robert was doing his thing, and he was in the UK and he was traveling and he was working with his acting career, his writing career, but yet they would always come back around, and the fact that he would call up your mother and say, "Hey, I got a plane. I'm flying you out to the Vineyard while I'm shooting Jaws." That to me is just, it's showing that there's a very tight family dynamic there. And I think that really resounds throughout the book. So very intriguing.
Yeah, they were very close. They're very, very close, and from a very young age. And there were 5 children in the family. Robert was the oldest. My mother was the third. And like any, family with 5 children, there were dynamics, right? So, certain kids butted heads with each other, and others became, close to each other and whatnot. Right. And through that sort of the happenstance of where they were in the, in the birth order, they became very close at a very early age. They bonded over sort of the sibling rivalry that was going on, and also over a love of literature. Robert was, and my mother was a PhD professor of English literature, and Robert was a prolific writer himself, and an actor. And any actor, especially a Shakespearean actor like Robert, they are very well read, right? And he and my mother started reading the same books when she was like 6 years old and he was 8 years old. And Robert, he was a take charge guy, even at, 8 years old. He said, "I want you to read the same books as me because I want to be able to talk about them before I go into class and have to talk to the teacher about them." So they started a habit that they kept up all through their, teenage years. And so it was wonderful growing up, with the 2 of them, and Robert kept coming back when I was about 5 years old, right? So at a very early age, and I'm born in 1957, so I'm talking in the early 60s. Robert starts coming over to New York City. And until then, we had lived on different continents. I don't remember much before 5 years old anyway, but I don't think we interacted very much. But when I was about 5, he started coming over to New York like every few months for a play or a meeting with somebody or, a movie premiere, et cetera, et cetera. And my mom would always get on the train from Philadelphia, go to New York City, and she would take me with her. So I was just a young kid, a fly on the wall, listening to the two of them,
Wow.
just laugh out loud about their childhood, despite the fact that they had a very difficult childhood. They didn't
Yeah.
have the easiest of childhoods. And Robert once said to me that anybody who says they had a happy childhood must have been very bored because nothing happened to them. And to say that things happened to them would be an understatement. And if you've read the book, I mean, you know some of the things that happened. Their father committed suicide. World War II, they was right there all around them. Their father was a doctor who came from a wealthy family, and so they were a wealthy family until he took his own life, and then they had nothing. So it was their mother, Mrs. Shaw, just doing whatever she had to scrape by, borrow money, rent out rooms to the during World War II to the American soldiers who had come in. The whole D-Day operation was much of it, if not most of it, was staged in Cornwall, where they lived. And so, they their teenage years, they were surrounded by American soldiers. And when I say surrounded, I mean, they would come and go on the streets, but mostly they would see them coming and going from the pubs, right? There was a pub down the street from them, and that's where they saw most of those soldiers. But in any event, they had a tough childhood, but my memory of Robert and my mother getting together and talking about that childhood was that they just had tears of laughter streaming down their cheeks at all the crazy things that happened. And that's not to say that they didn't talk about their father and his death. That was a very sad thing, right? But I never heard them really talk about that. They talked about the time that they hit the U.S. general with their water gun and had to run for their lives, and silly things like that. Daphne du Maurier, the famous writer, she wrote Rebecca, The Birds, right? The Hitchcock movie, The Birds. She knocked on their door one day out of the blue and got into a battle with their mother about how many evacuees from London they would be taking in. So those were the kinds of things that they remembered and talked about. And I never saw anybody laugh so hard as those two when they were talking about their childhood.
Wow.
And it really was a very dark, I mean, compared to say maybe what we grew up with, what they were going through. It was a family of 6, single mother, living through that time period as well.
Yeah.
So, seeing the stubbornness, but seeing the ability to bounce back and the aspiration to succeed. I see that likeness. And the only reason I keep referring to your mother, your uncle, and your grandmother is because those are the ones that really stood out in the book for me above all else. And I see those qualities in all three of them intertwined throughout that story. So it's very much a common thread. As much as it comes off of being brash or harshness at times, or maybe almost seeming like not caring, or it's more or less, you do what you have to do to get through certain situations. And so the fact
Survival.
Yeah. And then the fact that they could look back at that and look at what could be viewed as the funny moments or the happy moments, or what now are, it says a lot, because a lot of people, particularly in our climate now, I think would really struggle a lot beyond what they did. Not that they didn't struggle, but they're, like I said, their stubbornness and willingness to be able to make it through that situation and come out on top. I mean, it really says a lot about the dynamics.
Yeah.
Would the word tenacity come into play in this?
Yeah. I think tenacity and never accepting defeat, right? Never,
Correct.
Failure is not an option, to quote, the guy in Apollo 13. I think they got most of that from their mother, right? She was, like I described her earlier, a very tough woman, but always with a twinkle in her eye, never quite serious, but still, right in your face constantly. But I think she imparted that really tough survival, attitude in them. And in fact, and this is one of the chapters in the book where I talk about what did what did Mrs. Shaw do for Robert and her other children? And this is how I describe it. Like, so I've raised 2 children, right? And they're now both in their 30s, right? But when they were young, I did what a lot of us did, right? Who've raised children. I read to them every night, read books to them, stories, told them stories. If they had homework, I was in there helping them with their homework, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I did all of that. Mrs. Shaw did none of that. She could not be bothered. She did not read to them. She did not think about their homework. She was by herself for the most part, right? Because her husband was gone. She read her newspaper and books and whatnot. But she gave them 2 things. And they both sort of go to the survival thing, Janie, that you're talking about, or the tenacity. And one was she gave them their accents. I call it accents, right? And accents plays a role in their story because they were born in England, in Lancashire, England. So by the time they moved to the Orkney Islands when they were 4, 5, 6 years old, they had English accents. And the Orcadians, like we said earlier, it's like, you guys are outsiders. And
Correct.
not just outsiders, you're English snobs, right?
Yeah,
So,
right.
So then
Yeah.
they took on, the Orcadian accent over, the next few years and became true Orcadians in their mind. And by the way, they thought that they were, really from Orkney all through their lives. And then they go to Cornwall and now they've got this Orkney accent, and the Cornish think that they're, outsiders, and they go through that whole thing again. But their mother made sure that they spoke, whatever the accent was. I call it accents, but they spoke the proper English. They, spoke intelligently and fully and didn't, use contractions or, guttural language or, anything like that. They spoke, the king's or the queen's English. And the other thing she imparted on them was, that nobody will ever be better than any of you. There's nobody that's going to be better. Don't ever be afraid of anything. You will, survive. And that's what she did for them. So when Robert, with, very little background in acting, decides to try out for a spot in the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, he was 19 years old. He'd spent his first year out of high school as a school teacher in London, which he absolutely hated. And he just took on this application and, prepared, you have to deliver like 2 things to them, right? Usually something from Shakespeare or something, related to that, and show them that you can act. And, it was that his mother's, acts, speak the proper English and have total confidence in yourself that she put right into the core of their being that got him into that. And from there, well, he had some ups and downs in his career. It didn't just take off and keep going. But it was how he got started in acting. And that's what his mother gave him.
And that shows up, talk about him going through when he was getting into acting, that he would go and he would get parts, sometimes even non-speaking parts.
Yeah.
And he would do whatever he had to do to make sure that the focal point of whatever that scene was, it was him.
Yeah.
He would upstage anyone and everyone, and he wasn't remorseful for it, to the point where it would, pardon my English, he would piss people off.
Yes.
But he did it because that was his time. He was on stage, and so he wanted to do the best job that he could. And so that, the instilling of that, do your best and do what you have to do is very apparent, and it's there. And it reads through many different, through other actors. And I think one of them actually was even Alec Guinness, who you talked about a bit in the book, that he had worked with, had a working relationship with at times.
Yep.
Everyone would point out on the professional side, hey, he just overruns the scene or overtakes, whatever is going on. And so it's very, very apparent that was instilled in him.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It worked for him and against him, right? He was a firm believer that when you're speaking, it doesn't matter how small the role, you've got to, consider yourself the star of the show. And it worked, so when he graduated from RADA, right, Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, he was employed by the Royal Shakespeare Company. And over the next 5 years, right, from the age of 20-ish or so to 25-ish or thereabouts, or 21 or 2 to 26, 27, somewhere in there, he did nothing but Shakespeare, right? Hundreds of, shows. And for people like, to your point, Nate, Alec Guinness and John Gielgud and Michael Redgrave, right? Vanessa
Big
Redgrave's
name.
father, some of the great, Peggy Ashcroft, some of the great Shakespearean actors, they saw something in him, right? This, I'm the star of the show. And that's something that, somebody like a Guinness and a Gielgud want to have, somebody who's going to add to their what do you call it? Performance, their cast, their group. There's a word for the cast, but in any event, can't think of it right now. But
Entourage.
What's that?
Entourage.
Entourage, maybe.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Yep. So, but it also worked against him because after a while, those same stars, right, who loved having this big personality, didn't like having the spotlight taken away from them. And Robert's career hit a bit of a lull in his mid to late 20s. And it turns out to have been maybe the best thing that could have happened to him because he had some time off, right? Because he wasn't getting, offers like he had. And he started writing. And he ended up in the next 10, 12 years writing 5 novels and 3 plays, among many other things. But, 8 works of fiction that 2 of his novels got turned into movies. One ran on Broadway for a year. And I can't think of many actors who had that kind of success, both as an actor and a writer. Orson Welles, maybe most famously, but anybody else that wrote, 10 different works of fiction in addition to a prolific acting career that, anyway, yeah, he was definitely kind of a dual threat, call it. I'm a football fan, right? So I bring in some sports metaphors, but he crossed over a couple of genres there. And I liken it to, when I think of his writing success, and he was award-winning writer for his one of his novels, and like I said, he was nominated for a Tony Award for The Man in the Glass Booth, which was his play on Broadway that ran for a year.
Yeah,
and I just made a list of the actors who performed a role that Robert had written, right? Not acted with him, right? Any major actor has tons and tons of famous actors that they've worked with over the years, but the actors who played not on the movie or on stage with Robert, but performed a role that he had written is like a who's list. It's James Mason and Richard Basehart and Kim Hunter and Sean Connery performed a role that Robert had written. Alec Guinness, Robert Redford, Vanessa Redgrave, Bob Hoskins, Leonard Nimoy, from Star Trek, et cetera, et cetera. And it reminded me of something I read about another actor, Warren Beatty, right? We all know Warren Beatty. And I always thought of Warren Beatty as, that Bonnie and Clyde. It's one of my favorite movies, right? Not as good as Jaws, obviously, but, it's a very good movie. And I enjoyed, he made a number of, good movies and good looking actor and all of that. And then I read once that he was also a director, which I hadn't really realized, and that he directed 7 different films. And in those 7 films, a dozen actors were nominated for an Academy Award under his direction. And that made me think, wow, Warren Beatty is much more than I realized, right? Sort of, again, a dual threat, right? Crossing genres very, very successfully. And that's what Robert did. not as a director, but as a writer. And I think he stands out for the success he had in both. An Academy Award nomination as Henry VIII in A Man for All Seasons, and a Tony Award nomination as a writer for The Man in the Glass Booth. That's unusual.
That's
Beatty was a quadruple threat because he directed and wrote and produced and acted. There were some years he was nominated in all 4 categories. So
Yeah.
And then, by the way, when you're talking about acting and writing, do you want to bring this back to Jaws, Nate?
You see the flag? Yeah, go right ahead.
I think it's probably fairly well known in the circles, right, that would be watching this, that he didn't just perform the Indianapolis speech, right? And he didn't come up with the original idea. That was Howard Sackler.
Yes.
I mean, kudos to Steven Spielberg for saying, as they were thinking through the script, what is driving this obsession that Quint has? And he reached out to a bunch of people, and one of them was Howard Sackler, who wrote The Great White Hope, right? Well-known playwright. And he came up with the idea, but he only came up with 2 lines, right? Let's say Quint was on the Indianapolis. That would make him obsessed with killing a shark. And then a dozen different people took a crack at expanding it into a real scene. Most famously, John Milius, right, who wrote Apocalypse Now. Yeah. But in the end, it was Robert's version that they filmed. And I think it's, arguably one of the greatest scenes in movie history.
Absolutely.
I liken the Indianapolis speech to like something like Hamlet's To Be or Not to Be, right? And, maybe it's reaching to, compare it to, the greatest writer of all times, William Shakespeare. But the analogy is that a soliloquy is when all the other characters sort of fade into the background. And the one lead character that you have not understood until this point, like with Hamlet,
Right.
From day one that his uncle had murdered his father, but he didn't act on it. He did a bunch of other things that seemed insane, and he killed people by accident. His girlfriend went insane because of his actions. And then he explains himself in that famous soliloquy, and you go, "Oh, I get him now."
Now it makes sense.
And that's what happened with Quint. Yeah. He made no sense. He was burning out the radio. Yeah. He was, telling the authorities that they're just finding stripers, and when there's a 25-foot shark circling the boat. And he just seemed like he was crazy until that speech. And then all of a sudden it was like, bang, I get that guy. He makes sense. He's not insane. So that was, but that was, I think, in one sense, the culmination, the capstone in Robert's career as a writer and an actor, was to, write and perform, one of the greatest scenes in movie history.
Do you feel that maybe that's where he was the most comfortable when he did that? Like the real true person that he came out in that speech?
Well, I don't know.
As an actor, as a writer,
yeah. I mean, it's one thing to, that we talked about Guinness, Alec Guinness, and John Gielgud, and they delivered, speech, soliloquies in Macbeth and in Hamlet and whatnot. They were always saying somebody else's lines. In that speech, Robert was saying, his own lines, the things he had written down. And in those days, right, it was pen and paper, none of this, recording
computer, no iPad, no iPhone, all the notes and stuff, right?
So he had some crumpled pieces of paper that he's trying to read to Spielberg. The night that he said, "I think you might want to hear what I've taken a crack at that troublesome speech."
It's an amazing speech to begin with, and it shows the power behind it, what he put in it, heart and soul.
Yeah.
And not only that, but also what it done for a lot of the veterans who were at that time on that boat and could not talk about that event.
Yeah.
It's powerful as well.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody a little while ago, but over the summer, who said that he knew the son of the captain of the Indianapolis, the USS Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And, you know, that captain had been put on trial and
Yes,
accused
yes.
of, you know, negligence.
Yes.
Did he?
Committed suicide.
I think he took his own life.
Yes, he
He
did.
did.
Yeah, exactly. And so the son said that when Jaws came out, it was a huge relief to, you know, put the spotlight on what really happened. And not that the speech went into, you know, any detail that, you know, didn't say that the captain wasn't at fault or anything like that, but it just gave it from a sailor's perspective. And
Correct.
so it highlighted it. And anyway, so the son of that captain said he just loved having it there. So you're right, Janie, that was very important to a lot of those veterans.
It was
Well,
a gateway for them to release what they had been holding for so long.
Oh, that too. That's right. Yes. I was coming at it from a different angle, but I can imagine.
No, absolutely right. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Because,
Hey, this is a family show.
Hello, Juanita.
Hey, guys.
I've never been in combat. My father was in World War II. But yeah, everybody that I know who has been in combat has never wanted to talk about it. And
Yes.
yeah.
Agreed.
Well, not many people knew about the Indianapolis or what happened to it
Yep.
until Jaws.
Correct.
It brought a spotlight on that whole event, on World War II, on all those brave soldiers that died. So that was really enlightening. I mean, even Spielberg didn't know about the Indianapolis before it was brought to him. So
Yep.
that speech is the cornerstone of Jaws. I mean, it really is.
Yeah. I think that's what,
100%.
it's what turns the movie from just another summer, blockbuster horror movie into, it elevated it for sure.
Heartfelt, right?
Yeah. A lot of
100%.
people
I mean-
go, I'm sorry, Nate. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. Go ahead. Nope,
Well,
go ahead.
because my grandfather did serve in World War II, and he was on a naval ship.
Mhm.
And when I heard the story the first time, I can only imagine, well, what that could have been my grandfather.
Yep.
I wouldn't have been
Exactly.
here.
They were kids, right? They were 18,
Correct.
19,
They were
20-year-olds.
kids. Yeah.
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 Yeah, Kelly,
absolutely,
definitely
Kelly. Yep, there it
elevated,
is.
as Kelly says here.
Yep.
And it takes it from being a battle or something that happened between two ships down to a personal level. When he comes on and delivers that, you're locked on him. It's now through the personal experience of him, and it just last week Wendy Benchley was on it and told us the story that we've all heard about the caregiver at the home that after the movie came out
Yes.
did not come to work the next day. Said my son was on the Indianapolis and I didn't know what had happened. When the movie came
Oh,
out,
wow.
he found out what happened, and she said, "I'm done." Yeah, I mean, really. I mean, it's
That was like
very,
a
very
closure.
impactful. Yeah.
Yeah. It was closure.
And I mean, to this day, you watch that scene, and when that scene comes on, you do the same thing that Dreyfuss does in that scene, and you do the same thing that Scheider does in it. You sit back. I don't care how many times I've seen it. You sit back in awe of it, and you sit back. You are locked in on him, on his eyes, on his facial expression.
Yep.
And the delivery of it. I mean, even I went and saw The Shark Is Broken, and his son. Not that I want to give spoiler alerts. His son gives that speech, and when he does it, and you're witnessing it live,
Crazy.
every hair on your neck and your arms stand up. I mean, it hits you and impacts you that much harder sitting there and witnessing that live, being his son doing it. I could only imagine sitting in that room and being Dreyfuss and being Scheider while they were shooting it. Mike, you always say about how Dreyfuss is not sitting there acting. That's
He's not acting. He's just
to that
mesmerized.
speech.
Yeah.
mesmerized.
And
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I like to tell people. I've always said this, or ever since Jaws. If you want to know what Robert Shaw was like in person, right? Walks into a room, conversations start up. Just look at that. Look at the expressions on Dreyfuss and Scheider's face, as he was talking. That was what a room sort of looked like. Maybe not to that level, but very similar. It was, something about the cadence that, he just drew people in when he started to tell a story. And so the Indianapolis speech was just like seeing Robert, maybe Janie, to your point, that was how I remember Robert, not telling stories about, a horrible thing like that, but whatever story it was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Yeah.
It's that personality and passion of how he tells the story.
Exactly.
And the enunciations of certain words to keep you drawn in and to, like Kelly said, elevate it. And I can kind of see him doing that even when he wasn't filming or on stage. You can tell he had that personality, which is great.
Yeah.
Well, he had a magnetic presence. I mean, whenever he was on the screen, you could feel that emotion that he was putting into everything, every scene that he was in. It was just, you couldn't take your eyes off him. I mean, it's three people in that film, but
I mean, he had some killer blue eyes. I'm not going to lie, even till this day.
Does he?
All the movies I've seen of him, right. you truly do lock in on his eyes and his facial expression when he's delivering. I mean, I didn't see all his movies, but the one, whether it was Jaws, whether it was The Deep, whether it was, what First Ten from Navarone, Bond. I mean, he has a steel stare to him and conviction to him. Really, like an intensity, and that's what you lock in on. Yep. I never thought I'd be looking into a man's eyes saying those things, but I do when I watch him.
I've said before, From Russia with Love, Red Gant, Robert Shaw is the only villain that I thought could kick James Bond's ass.
Oh yeah,
agreed.
This might be the last movie because he's
So, he was a good villain. That was the second of the James Bond movies, right? And as Carl Gottlieb, right, the screenwriter for Jaws, and I got to know him a little bit. Met him at Jaws Fest back in 2012, and then had a couple meetings and phone calls with him after that. But he said to me, the thing about Robert's role in For Russia with Love is that it was the first sequel in the James Bond movies. And Carl Gottlieb is no stranger to sequels, right? Because he wrote Jaws 2, and then there was a Jaws 3 and whatnot. But he said, you never have a sequel unless the movie is an enormous hit, but you never have a third movie come out unless the sequel is also a big hit. If that flops, that's where it ends. And he said, so think about what happened after From Russia with Love, Chris. Every 2 years, a new James Bond movie came out. There's been 25 sequels since then. And and I'll tell you another story. As long as we're on From Russia with Love, Mike. So that train scene, right, where they have a fight to the death. And now I don't know if this story is true, right? I come from a family of storytellers, and I am simply relating what I heard. I was not present, but something my mother said to me was that in order to get Sean Connery good and angry while they were fighting each other and filming that fight scene on the train, Robert was telling him stories about Sean Connery's wife. Robert had dated before Sean knew her. And according to my mother, when she said, well, what did you tell him about her? And Robert said, look, as a gentleman and an Englishman, I cannot say. Suffice to say, Sean got pretty upset. and then it's much better known that he did the same thing to Richard Dreyfuss on the set of Jaws, right? He needled him, even though in fact they were very good friends. And there's a bit of a myth in some circles that they did not like each other, and I imagine that came from anybody who's on the set watching them in their Quint and Hooper costume, right? Because when that happened, they got into, whatever you call it, right? Not method acting, but, into the role, and they were butting heads. But my mother spent a week on the set with them, and my grandmother did. But my mother said that it was very obvious that they were very good friends, got along very well, and liked each other enormously. So
Richard told me they had made plans 10 years after Jaws to do Shakespeare together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've heard that too. Exactly. Because one of the things Robert did was he played Claudius in a version of Hamlet called Hamlet at Elsinore with Michael Caine and Christopher Plummer. And yes, I heard that too, Mike, that Richard Dreyfuss was saying, hey, let's do Hamlet together, right? I'll be Claudius, you can be Hamlet, or whatever.
There was never any doubt. Yeah, there was never any doubt. Richard always says that he totally respected the way that he acted, and just the utmost respect for Robert.
Yeah,
1,000%.
And vice versa.
Correct.
Richard, I think he was 27-ish or so at the time, and Robert was in his mid 40s, 46, 47. So Richard might have come across as kind of a young upstart to a successful actor, but Robert didn't take it that way. He thought he was talented and bright, and he liked him.
Wow.
Sure. Could I just kind of jump in real quick? Two things. Number one, Mike, I know that you've got some things going on this evening. I know once we hit the hour mark, which is usually about what we do, that we usually wrap up. We can kind of continue this conversation, but Mike, I didn't want to have you be overrun on time. Is that all right?
That's fine.
All right, great. All right, so Mike, thanks for coming and hanging out with us. And
yeah, he got to go see Sir Paul this week. I'm jealous.
Yes.
So it's just Beatles song. I'm like, my God, play some Wings.
Need some Wings now.
Live and Let Die, right?
I was gonna say, did he sing "Live and Let Die"? Because that's usually what he does in his set.
All the pyrotechnics. I did my first TikTok. My first TikTok I did today was him from the concert. So
I'll have to go.
Send me that, Michael. Send it to me, and I'll put it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
why not?
Chris, thank you so much for coming by. I'm like halfway through the book because I had a busy summer too. But thanks for coming on. I know we talked about your mom a little bit out on the vineyard. Give her my best.
Yeah,
and
I will.
Like I said, if you want, I know you said you hadn't had that picture. I'd be happy to send you a copy of that if you want that.
I'd love to see it. Yeah, my mother's 95 years old, still alive, and still as sharp as ever.
Oh, wow.
And I'd love to pass that over to her. She had a lot of fun. That week.
Great.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Everybody have a good weekend, and we will talk soon.
See you, Michael.
Thank you, Mike.
Good
Have
night.
a good weekend, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Yeah, I apologize. I didn't want to interrupt, but I also want to be respectful of everyone's time. And Chris, same with you as well. So stay on as long as you want, but also, just got to let me know. But we do have a couple comments on here too, people jumping in. So Kelly's saying that, yes, whether he's been stoic, his little smirk lets you know on the joke and the piercing stare, he definitely drew you in. That's 110%. And again, before I interrupted there, Chris, Robert's chiming in. Glad to hear that they got along at all for the most part. There's a lot of dialogue in the book from during the shooting of Jaws of Richard Dreyfuss.
Mm-hmm.
And a bit of the back and forth and some really neat dialogue between Richard Dreyfuss and your grandmother. And the fact that she saw him as an admirable person and an actor different from other actors. And so not just Robert kind of showing that you really shed light to that they weren't butting heads and at each other. I always look at it as they probably did it because it was good for the relationship on screen. It kind of solidified the fact that they were butting heads on screen, but I never took it as they hated each other's guts. I took it as they were hazing each other at times, I'm sure. Don't get me wrong, but let's face it, if you grew up a boy, you did that to your best friends because they were your best friends at times. And so I really always took it as that. And I just thought it was really interesting to see that relationship and some of the dialogue that Richard had in the book, both with Robert and with Robert's thoughts on Richard, but then also with your mother and with your grandmother. In fact, there was a lot of back and forth between your grandmother and Richard. And I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. Have you guys ever taken a parent to work?
Well,
I don't think so.
not really to work, but I was my father's student at one time. So does that count? Yeah. He was he was an educator. Yeah, he was a teacher of mine. So,
but that's what Robert did on the set of Jaws. He took his mother to work, right?
Instead of bringing his daughter to work,
and his mother and sister, exactly.
Okay.
And but he was confident that his sister wouldn't embarrass him, right? And other family members at other times. He knew he was in trouble when his mother showed up on the set, right? He didn't even want her to come because he was afraid that she would say things to Dreyfuss and Spielberg and whatnot. And because she didn't really have much of a filter, right? She said whatever she thought. And sometimes parents can embarrass children, when they talk about what they were like as a 6-year-old or 8-year-old or the trouble that they got into. But it was a lot of fun when I got to that sort of part of the story. And I'm talking to my mother for hours and hours about this. I said, I got into this with her by saying, hey, I think there's an interesting story here. Would you help me, flesh it out and remind me of things? And when we got to, the things that Mrs. Shaw said to Richard Dreyfuss and to Steven Spielberg and whatnot, it was just funny to hear. And I just put it down on paper the way I heard it.
Yeah, she was very, very. Go ahead, Val. I apologize. Go ahead, bud.
Well, Chris, what would you think? What was Robert Shaw most proud of in his whole career? What would you think that was? What was he most proud of?
Well, in his career, right?
In his career, right? Not his life.
Yeah, as opposed to, he had 10 children, and he was, a very devoted, family man. So I think he probably was proudest of his children. But in terms of his career, I think it was definitely his writing. He thought of writing as the epitome, of the arts, world, right? An actor is saying somebody else's lines, right? A painter is capturing, what you could capture in a photograph, et cetera, et cetera. But, and by the way, having written this one book, I have so much respect for him and anybody that can write as prolifically as Robert did. But writing is a really hard thing to do, because to capture how somebody really talks and what they how they really think and feel and see around them is not easy. And human beings are just such a complex animal, or whatever we are. We will have a relationship with somebody, and then somebody else walks in the room and everything changes. Right now there's a different dynamic between three people, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So Robert definitely saw writing as the most challenging of the arts, and something that I think he was proudest of. But it didn't earn him any money. And he acted, to be rich, and he wrote to, be artistic.
Which movie role was his favorite?
I don't know. Some of his. I'll tell you I don't know. I don't know what his favorite was, or even if he thought that way. Right. Certainly, he's going to be most famous for Jaws.
Right.
One of his early movies that I think showed sort of that early acting chops was it was a Harold Pinter play turned into a movie called The Caretaker. They changed the title for the movie to The Guest, but it's called The Caretaker, in which he plays there's only 3 people in the entire performance: Donald Pleasance, Robert, and Alan Bates. And Robert plays a man who has just come off of electroshock therapy in a psychiatric ward. Wow. And he's out now just describing what it was like to go through electric shock therapy, and that's one of my favorites. He was a big fan of Harold Pinter. I remember once, and I didn't hear him say this directly, but I saw it on one of his interviews, where somebody asked him, when you're given a script, do you improvise? Do you ad lib? Do you read it just the way it is? And his answer was something to the effect of, it all depends on who wrote the script. If, with some people, improvising and ad libbing is absolutely fine. But with somebody like Harold Pinter, it's so well written, according to Robert. And
You would need to.
yeah, it's so well written that you've got to look at not just every word, but every punctuation, and you've got to pause in the right places, and you've got to do it exactly the way he wrote it. I'm guessing that some of the work he did with Harold Pinter was some of the things he liked the most. I'm hearing a ringing sound.
Yeah,
I heard that too.
Sorry, it's my problem.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right.
Well, we
Well,
thought
he
it was
was,
Tinkerbell, but that's okay. There she goes again.
Dinner's ready. Dinner's up.
I pulled a quote from your book that kind of relates a bit, I think, to him and how his approach. And the quote was, "There is no such thing as an enabler." Like someone accused him or someone else of being an enabler. He said, "There is no such thing as an enabler. Each person is responsible for his or her own actions." And, shouldn't feel bad about being proud and taking credit for that as well.
Yeah.
And I think that really kind of rings and holds true, with what you were talking about. He would put in what he felt he had to do to make that performance where it should stand, whether it wasn't written well and he would really have to put his own into it, or if it was scripted so well, he could pretty much stick to what was there because you knew it was going to work or not, to where, oh my gosh, the part, he was telling your mother, I believe either the mother or your grandmother, about he was getting ready to shoot, or he just got done shooting the scene, his death scene, where he's in the mouth of the mechanical beast. And everyone's going, "Oh my gosh, you're amazing. You make it look so real, even after, you had a long night last night." And he says, "Well, I wasn't acting. I was scared to death of being in the mouth of that thing." He's like, that was my natural reaction. So the fact that he could, he would have to sit and gauge out on his own. I mean, he was making it work, and he knew what he had to do to make it work. So it was very much taking responsibility for that, whether it was good writing, poor writing, or his judgment and what he had to do. Very resounding.
Yeah, Nate, those are great examples that illustrate what we were just saying. And he was a very, very honest person, right? He was honest with himself. If he did poorly, if he did well, he would just say it. What was tough for some people, and he was the kind of person that was either sort of liked or disliked by the people around him, and not even just liked or disliked, like really loved or really hated, because he, as honest as he could be about himself, right? And a lot of people might say, if somebody says, "Wow, great acting out there today," many people would just say, "Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I guess I'm a great actor," and he would say, "I wasn't acting. That was just natural, natural."
Real.
But he could be just as honest with somebody else, right? If they didn't, perform well, he would tell them that, and he would tell them that in detail, and it rubbed some people the wrong way. But I've always thought that the people that really got along well with him were the ones that were really comfortable in their own skin, and could sort of take that brash honesty and give it right back to him. And those are the people he really was close to.
So people that would banter back to him, he would feel comfortable with.
Yeah. And were honest.
Yeah.
And intelligent, right? There's always that too, because he was a very, very intelligent, quick-witted guy.
Quick-wit.
I mean, they all were. I mean, there was, I can't remember who it was in the book, mentioned to your grandmother, your kids are very intelligent. They're very well spoken. They're very well written. Yeah, absolutely. So that intelligence was there, and I don't know, I have to surmise this. I would assume that if someone were to come off as being fake or patronizing, they would probably be very turned off by that.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
there's no genuineness in that. There's no reality to that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would think that that's not the way they live. It's not the way they were raised. And to point, your grandmother was that way, and I think that moved on and showed up in the personalities with the children. You allude to in the book the fact that that the mother talked about the fact that almost irony with her son being portrayed as Quint being eaten by the shark, and how that was being reflective and her response to Robert and how he was living his life at the time and how he was slowly being eaten away by some of his own vices.
Yeah.
And so that she was very straightforward with him, and that's the way he seemed to be from what I've seen and what I read. And I would assume your mother and probably your aunts and uncles as well.
Yeah, exactly. My mother had a very mixed reaction to her visit to the set of Jaws. Fascinating and interesting, and she absolutely adored, her older brother Robert. But she saw him drinking more heavily than she'd ever seen him before, and it was a sad time for her too, because
that's heartbreaking.
He was afraid.
Yeah,
Pardon?
that's very hard. It's heartbreaking to see someone, family member, or friend, or a sibling that you're so close with, and you see them destroying themselves practically.
Yeah.
It's very heartbreaking.
Well, and seeing that cycle repeat itself, I'm sure.
And repeat itself, correct.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
right.
Yep.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm not trying to be abrupt here, but also I feel like we've hit kind of a pretty good point here, really diving into the books and the characters. And to be honest with you, I also don't want to ruin anything for anyone. So, Chris, if people, I know, not that I probably dropped way too much already, so I apologize for that.
I don't think you did. If there's anything that you've done, it's made it more intriguing for them to go and get it.
Right.
Well, I hope above else I've come across as someone who is definitely enjoying the book, because I truly am. I've been sitting going through it and very much appreciate how it's written. And again, it's not just a Robert Shaw book. It's literally it's your family.
Yeah.
It's you're getting a theater seat to your family and the dynamics and how that follows each one of them in their own lives, and how those lives constantly intertwine and those same themes kind of show up, regardless of the setting. That shows up, and yet it comes back around, and then they still have that closeness, which is incredible. It really is. And so,
thank you.
Definitely, if you guys have not read the book, I would strongly suggest getting it. And where if someone were to be looking for it, where would be some good avenues to look down for the book?
Anywhere online, right? Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, etc. Most local bookstores and Barnes and Nobles have it, so you can find it anywhere, I think.
Good, because there's a new Barnes and Noble that just opened up in Knoxville. I'll have to, just down the street from my job, I'll go look for it.
Okay. Well, thank you.
There you
And if they're not selling it, tell them they should.
Yes, exactly. And it is available. I'm sorry, there is an audio version.
I'll just bring my weight around and go, do you not know who I am?
there is you can get it on digital audio as well, through a lot of your I believe Apple, I believe Amazon, and places as well. And you guys at home, check out Chris's website. You can also get a little more information and probably look through there as well. In fact, not only does he have that book, he has a couple other things that he has done and written as well. Am I not mistaken by saying that?
You're not mistaken. And I'll be coming out with some more things. Yep, there they are. Those first two are part of a young adult trilogy, work of fiction.
Wow. Wow. Very nice.
Sounds
Is
interesting.
this Cricket Magic? Is that cricket like in the game, or
Cricket Magic? Yeah, that's the trilogy that I'm working on now is a similar story, but set in
in 3 different continents and 3 different sports. In
Oh, cool.
North America,
Okay.
a little
See
boy is
baseball.
trying to overcome a handicap and
Right.
follow in his father's footsteps to play baseball. In
Oh.
India,
Oh, very nice.
same thing, but with cricket. And then the third one will bring in a boy trying to, be part of the World Cup soccer. A boy in Argentina growing up.
Very
Oh,
interesting.
And they all have different handicaps, and they all have different stories. But they have the one thread is that a mysterious fortune teller helps each one overcome their challenges and go on to success
Oh, wow.
despite their
nice.
handicap.
Sounds
Very
great.
nice. It really does.
It's fun.
Very much so. So I urge you guys to get out there and check out not only the Robert Shaw book, but some other things that he has. And yeah, very well done. And we actually got Kelly's asking a question about some of your books here, Chris. It says, do you ever offer a signed book plate for those that get the book from a store?
Yeah. The answer is yes. I've mailed some signed book plates to several people, and my website is www.christophershawmyers.com. Right, so just Christopher Shaw Myers, and there's in the contact section you'll find my email address. Send me an email with the address to send it to, and I'll put a signed book plate in the mail to you. Okay.
Well, the next time you talk to your mother, please give her our regards. She was a delight when I met her back in 2012.
Oh, that's great,
And
Janie. Thank
and
you.
and this kind of come full circle for us, especially for me and Mike. So, it's
That's a
it's
great
yeah, look at her. That's the picture I have. That's one I took of her. Yes.
Oh, that's
Look
great.
at that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love
and
it.
I think the gentleman that's kneeling in the shorts,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, I think that's Michael, and he is the one that did the music of the Shark is Still Working
wow.
documentary. So
Huh,
yeah,
no
because
kidding.
they were promoting the music at the time, and it came out with Eric Hollander and all those guys. But I think that's Michael McCormick, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, she was sitting there and she was just, I'm like, oh, let me sneak it. I snuck it in there. I was like, click. That was it. I was done. So, but she was very kind to give me an autograph. So I have it in my Memories of Martha's Vineyard book. And so I'm very happy that you came on. Thank you so much.
Great. That's
Absolutely.
great to see. Thank you, Janie.
You're welcome.
Okay. Well, so Nate and Val and Janie, thank you again. This was
Thank
such
you.
a pleasure,
Terrific.
talking about this, and it's just it's a fun topic, right? Jaws, Robert Shaw. It's just
Absolutely.
you can-
Kidding?
It is always
Yeah.
a fun
For hours.
a
topic.
lot of fun.
It really doesn't
I
get a lot more manlier than that. Let me tell you. You're talking Robert Shaw and Jaws. I mean, come on, really. I mean, that's just no joking aside. I mean, really, that's
the contribution that he has made as being Quint is going to carry on the way that, and I'm going to say this really funny, but I'm not comparing, but as Judy Garland did as Dorothy in The
Yeah.
Wizard of Oz, this is going to
Yeah.
carry on for decades.
It's one of the most iconic characters ever
correct.
portrayed or created. It's
Correct.
everybody knows Quint.
Yeah,
Everybody.
I
exactly.
mean, how many people have a duck that looks like their uncle? I mean,
Oh, that's
seriously.
funny. Look at that. That's great.
This was my
not
Christmas
many.
gift from Nate.
that was from me. That's right.
They're against it.
It really does
That's
look like
right.
it.
And even if someone disagrees, they're not going to come on here and say that. There's way too many people.
Yeah,
Really,
we'll fight.
no.
Yeah.
All joking aside, I mean, truly, I mean, yeah, he is, an icon onto himself in many different aspects and many different facets. Yeah. And I want to say that resounds in everyone in your family. There's diversity. There's a willing to succeed. And Chris, obviously, you have that as well. I mean, you talk about being a diverse man, and you've done this and done that, and now you're on to a different aspect of your life. And so,
Yeah.
it's very apparent. So, yeah, wonderful. And you do it well. So I really want to thank you for your time. Really want to thank you for spending time and hanging out with us and entertaining us for an hour. A lot of fun.
It's terrific. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep,
Thank
and
you.
good luck with the grandbaby. Good luck.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Talk about important things in life, right?
That's right.
Yes.
No,
Yes,
but thank
you're
you so
not
much.
kidding.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And if I could trouble you for like 10 more seconds. So we have a little thing that we do here at the very end, if you don't already know. And that's
I don't.
just, it's very fitting. It's very fitting tonight. So every night we end it, instead of saying goodbye, we do a quick shark fin, and then we let your Uncle Robert take us out every night
Oh,
that
yes,
we air.
we do.
So we're gonna
But I'm going to do it
we
with a
will
duck.
pull that up and we will take him out and let him take us out. And I want to thank you again, crew, as always. Love being together with you guys on Thursday night.
Thanks, Chris.
Everyone at home, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight.
Thank you.
Yep.
Another wonderful night. Check us out YouTube. Check us out on Spotify. Check us out over on Amazon. This will definitely be airing over there. And Chris, I'll send you the link to the show when we are done with it. And just a little thank you for hanging out. And we'll let your uncle take us out tonight. So here we go. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Farewell and adieu to you fair Spanish ladies. Farewell and adieu, you ladies of Spain. For we've received orders for to sail back to Boston. And so never more shall we see you again.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good night.